everybody. We're so glad you are here with us. We're so glad that you're choosing to engage with American history here at Gettysburg 162. I'm Garry Adelman. We got Kris White behind the camera. We got a couple other guests with us that we'll bring on soon enough. And we hope that you'll be able to follow this channel and follow us and our guests around the Gettysburg battlefield for this 162 commemoration. Some call it a celebration. I usually call it a commemoration here. Now, we are standing in a place that most of y'all have probably never stood before. And by the way, before long, we're going to set up the campaign. We're going to set up the Battle of Gettysburg. We're going to make an announcement because there's some good news going around here. Hopefully we'll interact and engage with some of your questions. But first, share this with your friends so as many people can engage with this history as possible. You're with the American Battlefield Trust, and I'm going to bring on Tim Smith right away. Tim Smith. He is from the Adams County Historical Society, or is he? He is the official Adams County historian, which is true. And I think there's another important announcement going on there, but we'll save that for a little bit later. But first, Tim, here we are standing. There's a swimming pool right behind Kris. I see a playground. I see two structures over here, and I'm not seeing any monuments or anything like that. So is this battlefield, and why should people want to come here? By the way, where are we?
So we're just west of Willoughby's Run and just east of what we refer to as Hers Ridge, in the middle of the first day's battlefield. And you know, I think over the years, different people have tried to impose boundaries on where the battle was fought and where it wasn't fought. You know, depending on how you figure, the battlefield itself is something like 20 square miles. It's something like 5 miles long and 4 miles across, and the town of Gettysburg is kind of in the middle of it. But this area was privately owned from the time of the battle until just recently. And I guess because it was privately owned, there sort of was an unofficial boundary of the park at Willoughby's Run, which is in the trees in front of us. But on July 1st, 1863, the Confederate Army lined up behind us and crossed this ground in a massive attack that we're going to talk about. And so thousands of troops fought over this area. Cannons fired over this land, and there were men killed on this land. So yes, this is battlefield just like any of the other areas around Gettysburg where there was fighting. It's just that this was private property for so long. And I'm so excited now to see that this property will be preserved as part of the Gettysburg battlefield.
And I have stay on for a sec, Tim, because I have another question. But first, you know, if you enter and donate to the American Battlefield Trust in the Super Chat, you get a call out. So Ghost of Sickles Leg, this is your moment. Your name has come up before. What an awesome handle on YouTube. I also see Tim is awesome. Tim Smith is great. Hi from Germany. Hello from Stoneham, Massachusetts, York, PA, Canada, all over the place. So we got lots going on here. Make sure you share this with your friends as we talk about this place. And now you know the American Battlefield Trust has been active, as well as the National Park Service, west of Willoughby's Run to actually do this. But zooming out to this, here it is. It's Gettysburg 162. I'm kind of excited, okay? Why? Why are these commemorations interesting to people, those watching and people like us?
Well, I guess the idea of talking about the battle at the actual moment where things occurred, or talking about you know, the fighting on the site of where it occurred, you know, is just something special. And I think for people all across the country that can't be here during these moments, you know, these anniversaries kind of supply, and the videos we do during the anniversary supply some insight for those people into what it must be like. And, you know, of course, you come out here on the actual day and you have the sun rise and set at the same time, and the weather conditions are the same, and perhaps in some cases, not this area, but the crops are the same. And we, you know, I think we all strive to try to understand what the battlefield looked like at the time that the people were here fighting.
Excellent. Good, good. And I want to thank Fran also for, Faye Boggs, I'm sorry, for entering the Super Chat on there. Super Chat is basically a chat with a donation. And thanks to John Bowers as well for all your support. I just think that the fact that 400 people are watching right now just blows me away. Not only the technology that allows us to come to you live from the battlefield, part of which you have helped us to save. We'll talk about that before long. And thank you to Phil and Ton7 as well. I can't keep up with all the donations going on here. But just what a great thing is that this many people want to engage with history on a weekday morning, here at the battlefield. Now, we do want to talk about preservation. We do have some announcements to make. We have some other things to do, and additional guests to bring on. But first, on June 3rd, 1863, having won the Battle of Chancellorsville, Robert E. Lee mustered the forces he could, and he is going to march famously up into Pennsylvania. Okay, I think y'all know this. There's some battles along the way. Brandy Station, Aldie, Middleburg, Upperville, and there's some other ones as well, and there are a lot of towns involved. But Lee comes up here and spreads his men out, okay, famously 30 miles west of here to Chambersburg, 40 miles north of here, almost to Harrisburg, 40 miles east and north of here, over toward Wrightsville, Pennsylvania, where a huge bridge will be burned, okay? But eventually, the Union Army, under a new commander, George Gordon Meade, taking command of, I think, the largest army in the world 3 days before the biggest battle ever fought in American history. General Meade is also known as
the greatest general in all of American history.
And Meade will come up toward this area pretty aggressively. Lee hears that Meade is coming. Lee decides to concentrate his army from there, and there. And that's where the roads come into play here. The roads bring the troops to Gettysburg. That's why the battle is fought here, not because of shoes. That is a long debunked myth, okay? Now, as the battle is starting, it's going to start on a bunch of roads, okay? Again, Gettysburg looks like a wagon wheel from above with spokes going out in every direction. So you've got Confederate troops marching up the Harrisburg Road, from the Biglerville Road, some coming toward the Mummersburg Road. You've got them on the Chambersburg Pike, and that's going to be the main route where the battle is going to start, of course, okay? A few miles behind the camera here, along the Chambersburg Pike at Marsh Creek, cavalry scout from lieutenant from my home state of Illinois, Marcellus Jones is who's credited with it, firing the first shot of the Battle of Gettysburg along Marsh Creek. Him and his troopers of the 8th Illinois Cavalry fall back across this land. The Confederates, this is Heath's division. You've got Archer's brigade mostly on this side of the road. Remember, divisions are made up of brigades. Brigades are made up of regiments, okay? By the way, divisions form corps, and corps form army, at least in 1863. You've got Archer on this side of the road, Tennessee and Alabama troops, plus Mississippi and North Carolina troops on the other side of the road. Those are under Joe Davis. In any case, Archer has some skirmishers coming out here. You've got Illinois cavalry falling up here, but it's not just infantry and cavalry. We have the long arm of the service coming on as well. And for that, let's bring on Sarah K. Bierle. You know her already. Sarah is the senior education associate, I believe. I hope I have that right, at the American Battlefield Trust. Sarah's a regular guest of ours. Come on, Sarah.
Thanks, Gary. So yes, as the battle is unfolding here on July 1st, 1863, we have some artillery that's going to come into play. And when I was a kid, I wanted to know if there was artillery involved in the fight between Buford's cavalry and Heath's advancing division. And I went around asking all my reenactor friends this question. And I'm very honored to be able to help answer that question here today. I think we just weren't looking in the right books a while back. So as Heath's division is advancing along the Chambersburg Pike, he has with it some artillery batteries. And these are going to be commanded by Major William Pegram. And he has 5 batteries under his command, but they're not all going to be at one place at one time. In fact, we were talking about it before we came on the screen, and there may even be some artillery mixed in with the infantry. Now, if you have artillery blocking your road, you're trying to get your foot soldiers into line of battle, that's going to take some time to get ready. So Heath is also trying to be on the cautious side. He's still trying to determine who he's up against. Is it local militia that's fighting him? Is it cavalry? Is it Army of the Potomac? Heath's trying to figure this out. If you're trying to get your artillery to move out of the way so your infantry can come into position, this is going to take some time as well. And this plays into what Union General Buford wants and needs. He's buying time, using these ridges out west of Gettysburg to hold off the Confederate advance in hopes that Union infantry, commanded by General Reynolds, will be able to come up in time to support his line and delay Confederate advances into the Gettysburg area. There's a lot of things happening simultaneously, and sometimes it takes longer to describe than it actually took to have it unfold. So as Confederate skirmishers are advancing eastward onto this very ground that we're standing, they're going to be approaching Willoughby's Run, which would be in the trees, which is in the trees behind me. Confederate artillery is also going to be coming into position, and it's going to take position on the high ground behind us, a little further to the west at Hare's Ridge. And this is where Willie Pegram is going to place guns into position. Now, there have been some artillery shots fired earlier in the battle. Those are going to come from Marie's Battery, the Fredericksburg Artillery. That's going to be fired further west as the first shots are happening in the morning. Then they're going to roll the artillery forward with the infantry and come into this position. So as the Confederate skirmishers come into this line, they are also going to come under artillery fire from the Union side. That's right. John Buford and his cavalry have artillery with them. Specifically, they have horse artillery. And you might be wondering, what's the difference between horse artillery and regular artillery? Think of it this way. Horses or mules pull most of the cannons used on battlefields during the Civil War, unless we're talking about the really massive guns like you'd find in forts. Horse artillery, though, is specific in that the riders are mounted, so they're able to keep up with the cavalry. You don't have the artillerymen running alongside those cannons. They're able to get on those horses and ride along, move rapidly. Now, Lieutenant John Califf, he graduated from West Point in the class of 1862. He's in charge of the detachment of artillery that Buford has. He doesn't have very many guns, though, so he's going to have to spread them out over the ground that the Union cavalry is trying to cover. They're going to fire some shots out into this area toward that Confederate skirmish line. That's going to let Henry Heath and the other Confederate officers know this is probably more than some local militia. They're starting to put the pieces together here. And as Califf's guns open fire, that's a big part of their understanding that they're running up against a more significant force here. There's going to be then artillery engagement back and forth. Artillery can fight artillery versus artillery, artillery versus infantry, of course, as well. So that's going to start happening between the guns under Pegram's command on Hare's Ridge and Califf's Battery, which is closer to the McPherson farm on McPherson Ridge. So the fight opening in this area, the ground that we're standing upon, does have artillery shells flying over it, and possibly even some landing in the area, depending on what they're targeting and what range they are using. Gary, you want to jump back in here?
Yes, I was gonna wait for you to give it right to Tim, but we got too much going on in the ultimate good problem to have. We have so many super chat donations that I might not be able to mention them all, but thank you, Charlie and Ian and Melissa and Lucas and Timothy York for the highest super chat donation yet. Thank you so much, and for your comment. Karen, Philip, and others who are donating, and I see you're checking in from all over the place. We have some people who aren't really Meade fans, and we have somebody who's channeling a little bit of Yoda as well. You're at the American Battlefield Trust. We are west of Gettysburg. Willoughby's Run, or the first day's battlefield, the McPherson Barn and Buford statue and everything is behind me. We are west of Willoughby's Run on land preserved by the members of the American Battlefield Trust. That's right, we can announce it today that this land, we have raised enough money and this land has been preserved, hopefully eventually to get into the National Park Service hands, and then with the land to the south of it that we helped them preserve many years ago along with the Land Conservancy, this can finally be a part of the battlefield, okay? But just because it was, as Tim was saying earlier, not monumented and memorialized early doesn't mean there wasn't intense fighting here. Somebody was checking in for the Iron Brigade. That's right, we're about to talk about them. So where we left it with Sarah talking about artillery flying back and forth, we've got Alabamians here from Archer's Brigade who are starting to engage with some falling back men of the 8th Illinois Cavalry. But there's Union infantry arriving. That's right, it's the Iron Brigade. They're going to be from Wisconsin at first. 1st, okay? At the same time this is happening, there's fighting starting to heat up on the other side of the road where Pennsylvania and New York soldiers are going to be fighting against the Mississippi and North Carolina soldiers. Okay, that's Cutler's Union Brigade against Joe Davis's Confederate brigade there. So, Tim, why don't you bring us forward here a little bit while I'll look at the chat here and everything. Get into the fighting a little bit here, because I think a lot more happens on this ground than people know.
Yeah, just a little overview of the fighting. Oh, you know, first I should mention that at the time of day it is now, in the time of the Civil War, there was no daylight savings time. So I guess we're really back at like 8:40 or something like that instead of 9:40. So this fight would just be getting underway. And of course, in more than, I guess, an hour, then Archer's Brigade would be crossing this ground. So basically, on July 1st, General Henry Heath came up on, I like to say Her Ridge, but, you know, Hare. I know some people with that last name. That's a Lancaster County name, and some families pronounce it Her, and I like Sarah's pronunciation of it, Hare. I noticed it when I do tours. If I say Her Ridge, Her Ridge, Her Ridge, ultimately somebody will say, who's she? You know, why are you talking about her?
Pretty good.
But it's fascinating that Heath arrives on that ridge behind the camera, and he is trying to gauge the situation. And what does he really know about it? He's been told that there might be some federal militia. And, of course, as Sarah mentioned, federal militia don't have artillery, you know, especially accurate artillery. So he knows he's up against a formidable opponent. So he spreads his division out. 2 brigades are lined up and eventually sent in, and that would be General James Archer's brigade here across this ground, and on the north side of the pike, as Gary mentioned, Joseph Davis's Mississippi brigade. Now, Archer's brigade crossed this ground, entered the Herbst woodlot. The ground out in front of us near Willoughby's Run was actually much more open, and immediately encountered the Iron Brigade in a huge stand-up battle. And, you know, the battle surged around, of course, for domination there, the Chambersburg Turnpike, which was laid out in 1815. Now, this battle ended in the morning action. You know, General Heath, who's not one to really mince words in his official report, says that he had been sent to Gettysburg to reconnoiter the enemy, and he says the enemy had been found to be in heavy force in and around Gettysburg. Archer's brigade was driven back. General Archer was captured by the Iron Brigade, and north of the pike, General Joseph Davis's brigade was driven back. And after that morning action, which there were substantial casualties, there was sort of a lull in the battle. And more Confederates were brought up. Pender's division arrived behind Heath, and Heath put his other 2 brigades, Brockenbrough's brigade and Pettigrew's brigade, in line over here. Troops arrived from the north under Robert Rhodes of Ewell's Corps, and during the afternoon action, several brigades of Confederate infantry crossed this ground, crossed Willoughby's Run, and fought a major engagement. But as these troops crossed this ground, artillery fire from the Northern Army would be plunging into them. Undoubtedly, there were men wounded and killed on this property, and the Elliott burial map actually shows a soldier buried just over there near the current parking lot. And it's, for me, it's so important that we have this land now and this parking area that will be easy to access the property. You know, when you have a piece of historic land, Gary, sometimes it's difficult to decide where to have an access point into the area without destroying the significance of the battlefield.
Balance with access.
And we already have a private parking lots that here will just open up incredible access to this site when it's restored.
Yeah, Tim's going way far, man. You just finished the whole battle and gotten into the future of this site. Hold on. So first of all, I have some questions for you. But first of all, let me just say, I think now's the time. We've been dancing around a little bit. There's a few announcements we got to make. First of all, with us completing our fundraising, and we can only do that with you, the members of this organization, and this was a tough slog. This was scheduled to be multiple apartment buildings. It had gone through all of the hoops till local people as well as preservationists got together and really fought this development. We worked with the developer, and now it's going to be preserved. It might be a long time until this is all looking like the rest of the battlefield, but that's the first step. But with this acquisition, the trust is announcing finally we have now preserved 60,000 acres in 25 states at 160 plus locations. And that means, woo, Kris is psyched behind the camera. That means Palmito Ranch in Texas. That means Davis Bridge in Tennessee. That means Perryville, Kentucky, Buffington Island, Ohio, and a whole bunch in Georgia, in Florida at Natural Bridge, in Mississippi, Alabama, all over the place. And it's all thanks to you, the members of the trust. So at the same time, we're really psyched that we've just sent our 60,000th student to a battlefield or a historic site via our field trip fund. So we don't just preserve, we educate and inspire. And what better way to inspire than to get people to a battlefield, okay? Now, Tim, I would say that this basic run through you just went through is probably over some people's heads, and it's probably too amateur for others. So my question sort of is, and I'll ask you to get into this in a second, is how do you go from one to the other? How do you understand the basics, and then what are the next steps? Obviously, to take the first step, if you haven't, read some simple books about the battle, if you haven't studied maps of the battle in time, our animated maps are helpful. Our 4-minute videos and these lives, they can get a little bit in the weeds, but those are helpful ways as well. But Tim, what strikes you? What's the best way to come and understand the place? And I'm hoping you're going to bring up one in particular.
Well, if you're an amateur and we talk about the Battle of Gettysburg, I would generally suggest that we talk about which state units are from. Like, these are Alabamians that fought here, men from Tennessee, and Davis's brigade is Mississippians. And we, especially with the school groups, we try to stay away from the term regiment, brigade, division, corps, because it can be complicated. But if you want to make that next step, if you want to go to the next level of battlefield understanding, I would suggest that you memorize the order of battle for each of the armies that were involved in the fighting.
At what level?
And, I think at brigade level is fine.
So now that's a pretty advanced thing to me.
You can memorize the corps commanders and what divisions are in each corps. So if you memorize the corps commanders and the division commanders, that's pretty good, because the divisions fight together as a unit. For instance, Heath's division here has 4 brigades. And at the Battle of Gettysburg, a regiment's about 300 men, about 5 regiments form a brigade. So a brigade is about 1,500 men. And wherever you go on the battlefields, these things can be helpful. So just knowing regiment, brigade, division, corps is good, but knowing who commands them, and then when you read about it, you'll understand where the units are on the battlefield.
Yeah, I'm just blown away here looking at the chat. I see more super chats going on, so let me scroll down to it. Eric and the Civil War Wanderer, good name as well there. Now, Tim, stay on here for a second, because somebody brought up, okay, and this is about the time when John Burns is, shooting at the rebels at this point. By the way, we have some people representing both sides here, and that's okay. Pick your side, be respectful to others, and we're happy to have you. So at what time? Because I think people confuse when John Burns is on the field. Is that when Archer first comes across? Is it when Pettigrew and Brockenbrough are moving along? What other Union troops are there? So in a nutshell, this is a good way to understand these things temporally. I always say, instead of looking at your clock or looking at the details of the regiments, think about what happened in what order.
That's right. That's right. A lot of times people are obsessed with 10:15. Reynolds is killed or whatever. But in point of fact, the chronology of events is much more important than knowing the time. And we argue about the times that different things happen. Like, what happened in what order is something that is more important to know. And the thing about John Burns that you just alluded to is that John Burns fought in the afternoon action. He did not fight in the morning action of the first day. The confusion comes from the fact that his statue is one of the first things you see when you enter the park on a tour, and people, when you tour guides and tour booklets and audio tour tapes, there, when you enter the battlefield, they're talking about the morning action because it's the first part of the tour, and they come upon the John Burns statue, and so they tell the story at the beginning of the morning action, and he was not involved in the morning action in any way, shape, or form. We think he was standing at the seminary building, jumping up and down, encouraging the troops as they came on.
He's almost 70. I wonder about him.
Jumping up and down. He can jump up and down.
And
I can still jump up and down.
Yeah, people do. You're right, but you're not. You're a few years shy of 70, maybe 2 years, I think. People have a tendency to also want to place their hero or somebody they're interested in at the most famous spot. So they know about Archer and Davis, and they know about the Iron Brigade splashing into Willoughby's Run like in the movie, and therefore we have to have John Burns there. We all do this, right? We want our person. I remember when I was a kid, and I confess I was a Cowboys fan for a short period of time, and I simply wanted Drew and Preston Pearson to be related. My wanting them to be related or to be brothers didn't make them brothers. And by the way, I was a kid. I might be getting that wrong.
So just to finish that, or in case somebody doesn't know, John Burns was 69 years old. He was a citizen of the town. He ran out on the battlefield in the afternoon action. He kind of got here in the law. He joined in the fighting. He was wounded several times and captured. And he survived the battle, survived the war to become somewhat of a national celebrity. Matthew Brady took his photograph. Bret Hart wrote a poem about him. N.C. Wyeth made a portrait of him.
Wow. So what I'm going to do here, I see Alex gave us super chat and he has a question. Now we've got more questions than we can answer, and here we're going to do something a little dangerous. We're going to descend ground and see if we maintain connectivity. Let me wait till Kris is done scrolling there. That's Kris White behind the camera. We've got Andy Poulton back at Civil War headquarters. Today it's Civil War headquarters. We'll call it American Battlefield Trust headquarters. He's the one monitoring the chat and responding to a lot of y'all. But Alex is asking a question about Dan Sickles and Gettysburg, but here we are on the first day, okay? So not only will we be covering the second day a little bit more tomorrow, but we're also going to hope to hold a live Q&A tomorrow afternoon. So if we don't get to your questions now, hopefully we'll cover them throughout the rest of our live coverage. Again, you're with the American Battlefield Trust. Kris is going sans tripod or monopod here as we descend toward Willoughby's Run, much like the men of James Archer's brigade here. Maybe I'll call it 7th Tennessee was coming back across here, 5th Alabama Battalion of Skirmishers moving forward here, okay? Now, Tim, people who are in the know that the Tennessee and Alabama troops, mainly Tennessee, gets pushed back by the Iron Brigade. The Iron Brigade isn't here all at once, right? And I was listening to the Addressing Gettysburg podcast the other day, and even as a battlefield guide, as a Gettysburg obsessive, I listened to these podcasts, Battle of Gettysburg podcast and others, and I gained some insights, just different ways of thinking of things, okay? And what you have here is the 2nd Wisconsin's coming on, and then the 7th behind them, and Archer senses an opportunity. Oh, we can sort of move around their flank. But then here comes Hoosiers and Michiganders over there. So you're sort of outflanking the flankers. At the same time, on the other side of the line, North Carolinians are getting around the end of Cutler's brigade. You sort of have Archer's guys trying to outflank the Iron Brigade, but the Iron Brigade's outflanking them. Tim?
Yeah, I think Archer doesn't exactly know the situation or what is going to happen, and his men are sent in. They're fighting against some skirmishers who have fallen back, and they cross Willoughby's Run in front of us and head towards what we refer to as McPherson's Ridge, and part of them are in the middle of the Herbst woodlot. And I think unfortunately for them, the Herbst woodlot sort of blocks some of their view to the fields south of it, where the Iron Brigade is rapidly approaching. General Reynolds, John Fulton Reynolds, who had been up near Caliph's Battery and had ridden back, realized that the Southern Army was attacking. In a rush, he went to the 2nd Wisconsin and ordered them to make a charge into the woods, and they went in alone without the rest of the brigade. Now, unfortunately for them, they hadn't even had an opportunity to load muskets. So they went from column into line on the double quick while loading muskets into a charge. And of course, in that charge, General Reynolds was killed, most likely from a volley of Archer's brigade. And the volley the initial volley or two of Archer's brigade stunned the 2nd Wisconsin.
Absolutely.
And the 2nd Wisconsin lost 116 men out of 302 in the morning action of the first day. They lost a substantial amount of men in this initial engagement.
And most of those in that first volley or two.
That's right. And initially, the other 3 regiments that were coming on actually were able to go into line of battle, load their muskets more effectively, and then come in. And when those other 3 regiments, the 7th Wisconsin, the 19th Indiana, the 24th Michigan, the 6th Wisconsin was held back, those 3 regiments charged down and, as you mentioned, outflanked Archer's brigade by crossing Willoughby's Run south of the Herbst Woodlot. And before you know it, General Archer believes he's doing very well against the 2nd Wisconsin somewhere out here in these woods in front of us. And wouldn't you know it, unbeknownst to him, the 24th Michigan completely crossed Willoughby's Run, and a large part of the Iron Brigade has outflanked him. And when he realizes the situation, the Archer's brigade is ordered, and Archer himself doesn't make it. And it's interesting when I look at the maps, the site of where Archer himself is captured is definitely west of Willoughby's Run, according to the accounts. But on the maps, the property that the trust just purchased and the property that was formerly purchased a few years ago.
Where's the dividing line for that? Are we looking at it?
I'd say it's right over there near where
right beyond these trees
where the weeds actually are a little higher out there.
Yeah, okay, yeah, you see.
Yes.
Exactly.
So
where
at the time of the battle, this would be part of the Spangler property, and that would be the Emanuel Harmon property. And there was a fence there, and it was somewhere where that fence hits Willoughby's Run, and just on the west of Willoughby's Run, where Archer was captured by the 2nd Wisconsin in a charge. And it was Patrick Maloney that actually made the capture.
How do you picture this capture? Because Archer was scared of this guy, right?
Yeah, well, according to the few accounts we have of it, one from the official report, I believe, of the 2nd Wisconsin, and another from Dennis Burke Daly, a lieutenant who was with the brigade. Patrick Maloney had looked over Willoughby's Run as they were charging, had seen Archer trying to rally his men, apparently ran down the hill, crossed Willoughby's Run, ran into the Southerners that were retreating, and just dove and captured Archer and pulled him to the ground.
I picture sort of like a real manhandling situation.
Yeah. And when Lieutenant Dennis Burke Daly got there, he said it's all he could do to keep Maloney off of him. Now Maloney died later that day.
Yeah.
But Archer's sword was taken in one of the more famous incidents of the battle. Archer was taken to the rear, and there are several accounts of this. One from a man in 2nd Wisconsin, and there's another good account of it. But the most famous, I should say, is Abner Doubleday, and apparently Archer and Doubleday had known each other prior to the war.
He was like the 20th general captured from Lee's army. Oh no, wait.
I'd heard
he was the first.
Well, sometimes you hear that Archer is the first general captured by the Union Army in battle since Lee has taken command. Because isn't Rooney captured? His son captured. Something. Does that count?
I don't know. We don't count him. It's Archer.
Okay. There's some ways. It's some creative counting to do that. There's a lot of creative things with
the
Archer.
First, the biggest, the most, the last, the anything is tough in Civil War land.
So Archer's captured, taken to the rear, and Abner Doubleday, who knew Archer, said, "Good morning, Arch."
I'm
glad to see you. And supposedly Archer says, "I'm not glad to see you by a damn sight."
Wow, man, rough words for the 19th century there.
And usually in accounts, when you see this, they put a D dash 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 or something. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm looking at all these things. I can't keep up with the super chat again, but thank you all for being here so much. I see Frank helping us out with I always like it when you're honoring an ancestor, and this one had an ancestor in the 99th Pennsylvania, a unit near and dear to me and Tim, fighting over at Devil's Den, and then moved to the center on the 3rd day. We've got Jerry, who was just in Savannah. In the meantime, I have Andy behind, like, on the chat giving me a hard time about stuff I'm saying. I've got a friend of mine texting me, where are you guys at? Come on, Wolf Tracks. Like, you could figure it out. Watch the video. And other things going on here. I see somebody who is from South Williamsport, PA, right across the river. I got married, and someone else from the Lehigh Valley, where I just was for 2 days this past weekend. You're with the American Battlefield Trust. We're on land that you helped us to preserve, and today we're announcing the completion of that preservation effort here. Willoughby's Run is right down, and maybe before this is over, I'll walk down and at least stand where it is, even if Kris, it's going to be up to him if he wants to follow me through the wet weeds over there. Yeah, it looks like looks like it looks like, okay, he's B-rolling it. Well done, Mr. White. Good, good.
One thing I'd like to mention, since you mentioned Williamsport, or Pennsylvania here, here's a great account from a book called it's called Gettysburg, the Pivotal Battle of the War, 1911, Robert K. Beecham. Just as General Archer and his captured men were crossing the run to the rear under a hasty improvised guard, and it became certain that we had won the first heat of the battle, a sergeant of our company, Jonathan Bryan by name, was shot through the heart by the Confederates from the edge of the woods beyond the field in our front, while waving his hat and cheering for victory. He was by birth a Pennsylvanian and one of the best and bravest among the 2nd Wisconsin. Comrade Bryan was the only man of our regiment killed west of Willoughby's Run. And of course, that's because Archer's brigade is in full retreat at that time as they cross. And Jonathan Bryan, I believe, I'm sure somebody will correct me if I'm wrong, is from Muncie, Pennsylvania. And his brother was in the 26th Pennsylvania Emergency Regiment.
Like Cumming County.
A few days before.
Wow.
So I think that's fascinating that it's a Pennsylvanian. And when Robert K. Beecham visited this battlefield in 1900, he was kind of surprised that there was no interpretation of the battle that occurred west of Willoughby's Run, or the fact that the Iron Brigade crossed and captured many of Archer's brigade in this area. He says, when the old veteran visited Gettysburg in 1900, he found no stone marking the spot where the brave common soldier fell, nor yet a monument or marker to show the place where we captured Archer, nor a line on a regimental monument telling the world this important fact. And so he wanted a monument placed, and he actually wrote an article in the National Tribune that he wanted a monument placed at the site where Archer fell. That marker or monument was never placed, and today we debate about the exact site.
Tim can only gesture.
Yeah, I can only
like
gesture.
This. Let me say a few things here. First of all, this is a quiz for Kris, Sarah, and Tim. Somebody, let me get his name right, bought but not watched, did something in honor of a soldier y'all know, and it's not far from here. I'm just going to give you this as the clue as to who he did to. Who's that? Thank you, Kris White, Benjamin Crippen. So thank you, bought but not watched.
Or is it the flag bearer of the 150th?
Well, I think, Ben Crippen is who he said, and that's who I was doing.
I know.
From the 143rd. Okay, and Jeff, for the super chat, Jerry as well. We're going to wrap things up pretty soon, but we're not quite done yet, okay? First of all, we encourage you, I can't tell you enough, if your ancestor or your interest is Little Round Top or Devil's Den or Barlow's Knoll or Oak Ridge or Oak Hill, we have videos on that already, okay? We can never cover everything in 1 year, although sometimes we try. Go check out our Gettysburg 161, 160, 159, 58, 57, 56, 55, and 54 coverage to see campaign sites and battle sites. We have been there, okay? We do have a lot of videos launching, both live and not live, during this anniversary. We have animated maps. We have hundreds of Gettysburg videos and scores of Gettysburg maps and other articles and resources. So don't worry, don't think that this video is everything that we have to offer, okay? We have a lot on YouTube, Facebook, and on battlefields.org, okay? Looks like Tim wants to jump in with something.
I did want to mention that two things. We have maps of this area after the battle. We have the Warren map. And on the Warren map, it clearly indicates that from the Herbst Woodlot all the way to the Chambersburg Pike, there are almost no trees along Willoughby's Run in front of us. That tree line was established as a barrier between commercial development and historic battlefield early on. And the idea, and I understand the idea is that we're on the historic battlefield. You don't want to be looking at commercial development around it. So a tree line or a buffer is allowed to grow up, concealing that development from your view. But now that this area is being preserved, perhaps that tree line can be removed and we can see the battlefield as it appeared at the time. The other thing is there are maps from the 1880s made by John Batchelder. We refer to them as hour-by-hour maps, although they're not really hour-by-hour maps.
For the first day only.
and in those maps, they show the Iron Brigade crossing Willoughby's Run, and they show them marching up towards Seminary, or I should say up towards Her Ridge. And not far behind this property, we can actually see the trees of Her Ridge in the distance. And it's interesting that, of course, Brockenbrawler's brigade and Pettigrew's brigade have been brought up, and it'll be a lull in the battle. But I always thought, what if they keep advancing, and hit Archer's brigade on Her Ridge? What would have happened then?
Wow. And it's interesting. I wonder, just thinking for yourselves out there, when you picture these battles, are you actually seeing them? Are you seeing lines on the map? You don't have to answer. Well, you can in the chat if you'd like. Are you seeing lines on the map, or am I seeing, like, standing here? Because I could see Tim when he was talking about Pettigrew and Archer. We know where they were. Are you seeing troops falling back? It's pretty interesting the way we all think about battlefields here. I want to thank Bavarian 760 and T. Lover, if I got that right, for your comments. I see a lot of other good comments. Thanks so much for all the kind words. And those of you all talking about West Point, it's perfect because it dovetails with what Tim was talking about here. Note how there is a little gap here where I can see some trees over there. Those trees are where Willoughby's Run is, okay? And again, at the end, I'll walk out even if Kris has close-ups of it, but you can at least see where it is. But note how there's a clear here. More than 200 West Point cadets came out and helped us clear this initial, set of trees so that you can get a view there. And in the right time of year, you can actually see the McPherson Barn and the seminary from here, showing us that these battlefields are connected. These places aren't that far apart. So I think it's great. If I know Kris White, he's probably already had this ready, and he's flashing up West Point stuff as we go along here. Now, one more thing, I think, before we go, and I'll probably look at the chat again, and then this will keep going. But Tim, the Adams County Historical Society is going to be known by a simpler name as of today. It is called Gettysburg History. Why? Hold on, let me cue you up, and then you can. Oh, you're dying to. The Adams County Historical Society has a museum, the Beyond the Battle Museum. They have a house museum called the Shriver House. They will, by next year, I believe, have another one, the Gettysburg, focusing on the Black African-American experience here in Gettysburg. They have the Gettysburg Film Festival, and they are really covering Gettysburg more broadly than ever, and Tim is their historian. Now go ahead.
Well, basically what we have done is we have the Adams County Historical Society, and that'll continue as the Adams County Historical Society, our county research facility. But we've also broadened our perspective, or we've started a new movement to have Adams or Gettysburg history. And basically with Gettysburg history, what we're doing is we're covering for instance, my internet videos will be under Gettysburg history. So a broad term to try to describe all the initiatives that we are focusing on. But we're still going to have the Adams County Historical Society, and that's still one of the parts of it.
So first of all, it's an umbrella. Like the American Battlefield Trust covers all of our stuff. And secondly, I'm already seeing 11, 12, 13, 16 people just said, okay, boomer, when you said internet videos. That sounded pretty funny to the young folk out there. Oh, it's 26 people have already said it. Just kidding. Now, we got to wrap this up, man. We have other places to shoot and whatnot. And I will say, if you're in town, I will be at Lee's headquarters between 10:54 and 11:56 if I make it there in time, based on what time it is now, just to say hello. We never say where we are. Telling people where we are slows down shooting. So I will be at Lee's headquarters for an hour, roughly, starting at around 10:54. I got some swag with me for you if you care. I don't know if Tim doesn't have a ride back, so maybe he'll be with me as well. Also, make sure you continue to put your questions in the chat here so that we can answer them at the live Q&A tomorrow if we can't do them as we go. know, by the way, for you, I think it was Alex who wants to know whether sickles saved Meade. Tim and I both say sickles. So no is the answer. But we'll get into that maybe more when we have Jim Hessler,
So,
where
you
we'll
know,
see some people
just
disagree.
to answer that, you know, it's
no,
like,
you
oh,
can't
should
resist.
I not? I
Go
can't
ahead,
talk.
you can't resist.
I was just going to say that, you know, Meade, some people are going to argue that sickles move forward, thereby inadvertently creating a defense in depth, which benefited the Northern Army. I say sickles, it's like he was in a
You
fist
just couldn't
fight.
resist. You're getting into the whole thing.
Yeah, he's in a fist fight and he breaks the other guy's hand with his face.
Well, that's sickles for you there, man. Okay, good. Sorry to interrupt you while you were on your joke crescendo there. Okay, two more things we got to cover here, okay? We have some buildings around us, one of which is kind of old, but there's an older building several hundred yards that way that's not even there anymore. Let's really summarize this. We've covered this before. So what's down there, what happened to it, and what's here?
So the Emanuel Harmon Farm, which was much of the ground south of this site at the time of the battle, after the Civil War became the site of probably the first expansive commercial enterprise in Gettysburg, the Gettysburg Springs Hotel. And that hotel entertained visitors to Gettysburg. They had medicinal springs, you know, near Willoughby's Run, and it existed. It was used as a dormitory in 1913 for the veterans at the 50th anniversary. It burned in a fire, off the top of my head, in 1918. Eventually, all this ground was purchased by the Gettysburg Country Club in the 1940s. And this building over here behind us is the Country Club building. Now, this was actually, even before that, a bottling plant for this Gettysburg Catalysine Springs company, like this water that, again, from Willoughby's Run, that had medicinal qualities. I don't think it really had any medicinal qualities. Who would buy bottles of water? You know,
Pretty good, Tim.
Country Club expanded, and there was another events center placed on it. And basically, what happened is the Country Club went out of business. They went bankrupt. They went out of business, and there was an opportunity a number of years ago for someone to purchase this land, and a bunch of groups helped out to buy the Emanuel Harmon Farm, and then recently, of course, the members of American Battlefield Trust were able to purchase this land. And so there are a couple buildings on this site, a couple more modern buildings, and there's a site of the Emanuel Harmon Farm somewhere out there, and the remains of the Gettysburg Springs Hotel also. So there's all this history of this area. But let me just say one thing.
Okay, because I'm ready with more.
The Gettysburg Springs Hotel, because it was a commercial entity established, opened in 1869, that's the reason that this land was never preserved as part of the battlefield, because early on it was taken over by a commercial entity. And it's just fascinating how the history of this site evolved.
Okay, good. Well, we're going to wrap things up here. First of all, though, let me say that somebody who I mentioned earlier, T. Lawver, his donation is in honor of Samuel Kosciuszko, Zook as well, who died in the wheat field or was mortally wounded in the wheat field there. And we've got so many other people here. All I want to say here is that we will work with the National Park Service, our best partners, in order to restore this site. Whether they restore it or we restore it, these things take a while, but this is a long game. Eventually we'll play this game, and this land will be preserved forever thanks to y'all who are donating in the Super Chat, you who are members of the American Battlefield Trust. I can't believe that about 1,000 people have been on this live. That means that people are interested. Share it with your friends. We're going to be live again later today. We'll have other videos launching tonight. Who knows? We might post some shorts over on Facebook, and we can't thank you enough. I also can't thank enough our guest Tim Smith here, Kris White behind the camera, Sarah K. Bierle, who showed up for a bit, and Andy Poulton back at American Battlefield Trust headquarters, and all y'all for everything you do for battlefield preservation and education and inspiration and restoration.